Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack what is literally a gripping historical thriller about a corporate mutiny, one that fundamentally rewired the rules of global capitalism. We so often think of the modern tech landscape as something born yesterday, right? Just a sudden explosion of apps and algorithms. But today, we're going to look at the absolute ground zero of this entire culture. We are going right back to the very moment the DNA of the modern startup world was sequenced. Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to picture the Santa Clara Valley in the late summer of 1957. At this point, it's basically an agricultural landscape. We're talking about a place where a third of the world's prunes are grown. Now, zoom in on a converted apricot packing warehouse at 391 San Antonio Road in Mountain View. Ask yourself, how did a single act of defiance inside that specific warehouse create the blueprint for today's entire digital reality? Well, we are charting a direct, unbroken line today. We're going straight from a microscopic, highly volatile technological revolt in the 50s through the global explosion of the microchip right into the bleeding edge of modern AI. Let's look at the pressure cooker that started the whole shebang. So inside that warehouse was Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory. It was run by Dr. William Shockley, who was a Nobel laureate, co-inventor of the transistor, and just an absolute theoretical colossus. He had somehow assembled the most elite solid-state minds on the planet. Now, his engineers desperately wanted to build silicon diffusion transistors, which were devices the military aerospace market was basically begging for. But Shockley, he totally vetoed it. He was completely obsessed with an incredibly complex, unproven device called a four-layer diode. And as production stalled out, his pure scientific genius devolved into absolute behavioral tyranny. Shockley actually forced his elite engineers to take mandatory lie detector tests. He was literally treating his lab like a paranoid spy novel to root out imagined saboteurs. Crazy, right? What we're witnessing here is a massive cultural clash. On one side, you have traditional industrial feudalism, which demanded absolute loyalty to a vertical hierarchy and a lifetime bond to the institution. On the other side, you have this emerging concept of a fluid meritocracy of ideas. Well, by September 1957, 8 of those brilliant researchers had simply had enough of the paranoia. When the lab's financial backer told them they had to submit to Shockley's authority, they made a really radical choice. They chose professional exile. They staged a clean walkout, completely bypassing the traditional hierarchy. And Shockley, absolutely furious, branded them the Traitorous 8. Having walked out, these 8 engineers faced a pretty massive problem. They possessed unmatched technical brilliance, sure, but they had absolutely zero wealth and no experience actually building a company. So they partnered with a young, visionary investment banker named Arthur Rock. Rock went out and pitched the idea of funding these independent scientists to 30 different major East Coast industrial conglomerates. 30 pitches, 30 brutal rejections. Wall Street simply could not comprehend funding a self-governing collective of rogue engineers who didn't have any physical real estate or asset collateral. Bypassing traditional Wall Street altogether, Rock gathered these exhausted men in the dining room of the Clift Hotel in San Francisco. He knew he needed to formalize their alliance to really bind them together before they went looking for alternative capital. So he pulled out a crisp, single $1 bill and had all 8 men sign their names directly across the green ink. It was this incredibly primitive co-founding pact, a physical oath of total alignment. And you know what? That unshakable solidarity finally captured the attention of a man named Sherman Fairchild. He was an eccentric inventor and actually the largest individual shareholder in IBM. Looking past the lack of factories or land collateral, Fairchild saw the team's absolute technical solidarity, and he provided a massive $1.5 million lifeline. To put that into perspective, for the first time in human industrial history, a massive enterprise was financed based entirely on the uncompromised value of raw human brain power. By September 1957, they had effectively engineered the modern startup matrix. Launching Fairchild Semiconductor, they completely tore down the East Coast corporate silo. Gone were the closed executive suites and separate dining halls. In their place, fluid stock options that ensured every single engineer was an equity-holding partner, and transparent, sunlit, open-plan labs where executives and technicians shared the exact same workspace. This horizontal cultural shift unlocked monumental innovation almost instantly. Free to actually explore and collaborate, the team focused their massive intellect on silicon. In 1959, Jean Horny invented the planar process. This was a massive metallurgical breakthrough. He used a flat layer of silicon dioxide to protect the delicate junctions of a transistor. That single invention turned chip manufacturing from this unpredictable, fragile craft into a precise, mass-producible photographic science. Building directly on that planar foundation, Robert Noyce took the next quantum leap. He figured out how to print copper conducting lines directly onto that flat surface to link multiple transistors together on a single sliver of silicon. He invented the integrated circuit. Yep, what we know today as the microchip. This invention sent Fairchild's revenues absolutely skyrocketing, permanently cementing this once rogue startup as a global industrial giant. So the crucial point here is that the Traitorous 8 didn't just build a single successful company. They built a fragmentation engine. When Fairchild's East Coast board started introducing bureaucratic interventions in the late 1960s, these founders didn't just submit. No way. They just executed the 1957 script all over again. They simply walked out to launch massive spin-offs. Noyce and Moore walked out to launch Intel. Jerry Sanders launched AMD. Eugene Kleiner and Don Valentine left to formalize modern venture capital by starting Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia Capital. In fact, a landmark historical study traced over 100 direct semiconductor startups straight back to those original 8 men. These spin-offs became famously known as the Fairchildren. Think about that. Corporate fragmentation wasn't seen as a failure anymore. It was the mechanism, the actual engine required to distribute technology, recycle wealth, and accelerate innovation across the planet. The container simply could no longer hold the genius. Let's pull this into our modern era, because this continuum of defiance stretches seamlessly from those hand-drawn silicone tubes to today's cloud data fabrics. The tools definitely evolved, but that spin-off engine remains exactly the same as we push into the era of cognitive AI. We are watching the exact same structural phenomenon play out right now in artificial intelligence. Just look at the OpenAI to Anthropic mirror. In 2021, top research scientists and engineers who were deeply frustrated by shifting commercial focuses in corporate governance at OpenAI executed a massive collective walkout to found Anthropic. They dedicated their new startup to algorithmic safety and open-source models. It's perfectly repeating the 1957 script of prioritizing alignment and scientific integrity over bureaucratic mandates. And the parallels don't just stop with corporate structures, they are intensely geographic. Modern AI founders have actually abandoned the sprawling, car-dependent suburban corporate campuses that defined the later hardware eras. Instead, they've returned to hyper-dense urban hacker houses in San Francisco, specifically the historic Mission District and Potrero Hill, which is now nicknamed Area 27. They demand an environment where academic research, venture capital, and developer talent exist in immediate, physical proximity. It is a direct, full-circle echo of the intense cross-pollination that filled the rooms of the Clift Hotel back in the 50s. So as you watch these new digital frontiers absolutely rewrite the rules of our global economy, compiling software code inside these dense AI warehouses, you really have to ask yourself, is the AI revolution just the 1957 script running on new hardware? The Traitorous 8 proved without a doubt that the future belongs to those willing to treat intellect as the ultimate capital. As today's bleeding-edge founders step onto entirely new frontiers, who is ready to sign their name to the next dollar bill?